if you only knew how I needed some kind of future, Natira.
You have lived a lonely life?
Yes. Very lonely.
No more, McCoy.
Bridge to all decks. Incoming asteroid, or is it an asteroid? Here on Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve. I'm Scott Mance.
I'm Steve Morris, and I just discovered that my house isn't really even a house. This office isn't an office. In fact, I'm just on a spaceship heading somewhere, and I don't even know where.
And if you go to the roof of your house, you would touch the sky. That is right, everyone. We are covering For the World is Hollow, and I have touched the sky, an episode that I've always really liked. Didn't quite love, but for a third season episode, I think it's pretty strong. What have been your thoughts over these years about For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, which is the longest episode title in Star Trek history, and from this point will be known as For the World is Hollow.
Well, speaking on For the World is Hollow, I'm going to use a word I rarely have used, which is I've always been ambivalent about this episode, and kind of mixed feelings. And it's funny watching it this time. I didn't think about it before, so now I know why I was ambivalent. I think this is an extremely mixed episode with some great performances and interesting moments, and a whole bunch of stuff that is like doesn't make a lot of sense to me at all. The more I think about it,
ambivalent is a word that probably up until recently I also would have used to describe For the World is Hollow. But when I was rewatching it, my appreciation of it went up a little bit, Steve, because of the conversation we just had recently on The Empath.
I agree. There's a real connection here.
There's an absolute connection. It's another episode that serves as a standout for DeForest Kelley, especially because we get so much more backstory into Dr. McCoy and sort of see the loneliness that he's sort of had for all these years. But also, even though DeForest Kelley has just been such a, essential character, McCoy being such an essential character to Star Trek, I feel like when we see this different side of him in For the World is Hollow, it made me sort of think that, maybe DeForest Kelley has been sort of underutilized because, we have not really gotten to see this side of him, but it is still an episode that I do like. Another episode after the Paradise Syndrome that deals with an asteroid of sorts on a collision course with a planet. It's not an episode that's big on action, but it is a deeply effective personal episode. And Katherine Woodville, who plays Natira, is really terrific. A strong character, a strong, complex woman, one of many, I have to say, in the third season, next to the Romulan commander, Miranda Jones, Mara from Day of the Dove, and Vanna from the Cloud Miners. Say what you like about season 3. Say what you like about Fred Freiberger. I mean, and certainly there's a lot that was not said that was very complimentary about Fred Freiberger. But Steve, I would say that when it came to female writers and female guest stars, female characters, that the third season actually had a better track record than the first two, probably put together. And it is because of a character like Natira of Yonada that makes me think, yeah, you know what? There is a lot to like and appreciate about season 3.
It's funny, I hadn't thought about it until you just said it, but in fact, not just strong characters, but just central characters. There are a lot of central character guest stars that are women, because you also have Miramani, you have Jem that we just had in The Empath, you have a lot of Troyes. Like, there's a lot of women that are really central to the plot in the third season, which is very different from the first two.
For sure. It absolutely is. And it kind of gives season 3 a different feel from the first two, and not just because of the cinematography and the production design, but
and I just flash forward to how season 3 ends and thinking about female characters. Oh God.
Oh yeah. Well, that is going to be an interesting episode to cover for sure. And I'm looking forward to, let's just say that, Steve, you and I are both looking forward to taking our time before we reach the notorious turnabout intruder, which is sad for so many reasons, but we digress. So For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky first aired on November 8th, 1968. It was the 63rd episode to air, and it was on November 8th that For the World is Hollow had its only network showing. So if you did not see it on November 8th on NBC, you had to wait till syndication where you could watch it over and over and over again. The episode was filmed between August 13th and August 22nd. It was filmed over. Okay, so the schedule, the mandate, Steve, for the third season was shoot these episodes on budget or under budget in 6 days or else. Well, For the World is Hollow came in at 7.5 days.
Oh, wow.
It was the 66th episode to film. So the per episode budget, Steve, for season 3 was about $178,000. Well, For the World is Hollow came in, the final cost, $201,371, making For the World is Hollow the most expensive episode of season 3. So its director, Tony Leader, or Anton Leader is his real name. This was his one and only episode. Interesting that he got to finish it, whereas the previous episode,
literally going to say the same thing. It's like they just fired our dear friend and one of the great Star Trek directors of all time, Ralph Sinensky. And then they let this one go 7.5 days and way over budget. Come on.
Yeah. And that episode was only a half day over schedule. But originally, For the World is Hollow was supposed to be directed by John Meredith Lucas. But when he ran late on A Land of Choice, and he went into overtime on the Enterprise incident, the bean counters at Paramount said, nope, we're going to give this to a fireman, which is basically someone who can bring the episode on schedule and on budget, but that did not work this time. But regardless, Tony Leader was a prominent director in film. He directed the movie version, the famous movie version of Children of the Damned, which actually served as an inspiration for our favorite episode, And the Children Shall Lead. But he also directed TV episodes of TV for Perry Mason, The Twilight Zone, Sea Hunt, Rawhide, Gilligan's Island, Lost in Space, Ironside, and Hawaii Five-0. For the World is Hollow was written by Rick Villartz, who originally wanted the script editor job for the third season that eventually went to Arthur Singer. Rick Villartz had also written shows for Mr. District Attorney, Science Fiction Theater, Lassie, and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. His first story outline for the World is Hollow came in on May 2nd, 1968. He proceeded to a second revised story outline on May 21st, then went all the way to a second revised second draft teleplay, which came in on July 31st. Arthur Singer did his rewrites on August 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then Fred Freiberger did page revisions on August 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Would you like to know what was going on in the world when they filmed this episode?
Let's hear.
It's, as you said, it's filmed from August 13th through the 22nd. I'm only bringing this up. I said I wouldn't talk any more about plane crashes. It's not a plane crash, but it's just, again, a thing happened. It's now happened twice, which is there was another helicopter crash flying from LAX, Los Angeles Airport, to Disneyland, killing 21 people. This is the second time this has happened in the last few months.
Oh, dear.
And it's so upsetting to me that there are a bunch of families on their way to Disneyland.
That is depressing, yes.
On the 16th, the U.S. launched 2 different multiple warhead systems. This is the height of the Cold War. We're trying to negotiate to reduce these terrible weapons with the Soviet Union, but we're also developing technology that is really, really scary. On August 17th, Mia Farrow flew from New York City to El Paso, Texas, drove across the border to Juarez, and 30 minutes later, she had gotten her divorce from Frank Sinatra, who she had married a few months earlier.
Wow, that was a quick wedding, wasn't it? A quick marriage. Yeah.
On the 18th, Brezhnev, head of the Soviet Union, convenes an emergency meeting to discuss what's going on in Czechoslovakia. And 2 days later, the USSR invades Czechoslovakia. Lyndon Johnson was supposed to go to Moscow, for a summit on arms control, and it was canceled because of the invasion of Czechoslovakia. They also, at the same time, NASA announced its new schedule for the Apollo program, including that Apollo 11 will land on the moon.
Ooh, that's so this is in August of 68. So that was about 11 months away, right? Yeah.
Yep.
That makes, yep.
On the 22nd, the 1968 Democratic National Convention opened in Chicago. Now, we're going to have a lot to talk about next week.
Yeah, we are.
A whole bunch of stuff is going to happen. And then here's some Beatles news I didn't know about, which is on the 22nd of August. And it was about somebody quitting the Beatles. I never knew this.
Okay, so this is in 68, right?
Yes.
So they were, I'm going to say that they were recording back in the USSR, and Ringo got fed up with a certain bass player named Paul McCartney, and he quit the group for 2 weeks. And the Beatles went on to record back in the USSR without him. Paul McCartney played the drums on that track. Remember that the next time you start the White Album. And they pleaded, Paul particularly pleaded for him to come back. And when Ringo came back to the studio 2 weeks later, there were bouquets of flowers all over his drum kit.
Scott, you continue to fulfill my faith in you. I was not sure that you would have that one. I doubted. I should never have doubted. Of course, you had it. The one other thing I read is, do you know what Ringo did while he was away for those 2 weeks? He wrote a song.
He wrote, what was the song? Was it "It Don't Come Easy"?
Octopus's Garden.
Octopus's Garden. Oh, well, There you go. It's a good thing he took the time off.
Exactly.
Yeah, Paul did him a favor.
There you go. It's so funny having watched Get Back, and my admiration for Paul just went through the roof. Not that it already wasn't there. And I could see why you could get pretty irritated with Paul.
Yeah, it's sort of this balance where you see how he was very driven. He was definitely a driving force by the Beatles, but that also got to be irritating to the other three. But when you're watching Get Back, even Paul has always been my favorite. All my life I've been a McCartney and Wings fan before I was even a Beatles fan. But when you watch Get Back and you just see how he was really trying to hold the group together, despite just really, really extraordinary circumstances, my estimation and my appreciation for him went up, and I did not think that was possible.
Yeah, and it's funny. I really relate to Paul. I really, after watching Get Back, it's like I've been Paul. I don't mean to compare myself in any way, but I've certainly been Paul in the feeling of I'm the one. I got to keep this together. And I know I've been Paul in irritating the people that I'm working with sometimes.
For better or for worse, my friend.
For better or for worse. Let's get into For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky.
Let's do it.
Start right in the midst of action. Music is tense. There are missiles coming towards the Enterprise. We're on red alert. Spock is sitting in the chair for a change. And in comes Kirk to get some information. And what we find out is these are very archaic missiles traveling at sublight speed. And Scotty says, and chemically fueled to boot.
I love how Scotty like zeroes in on the technical aspects. Because remember in Spock's brain when they approached the alien ship and it was ion powered, and Scotty goes, they could teach us a thing or two. But this is a really strong opening for a teaser showing the missiles approaching the Enterprise, and the music, which I forgot to mention, is tracked. No new music was recorded for this episode. In fact, I believe the only other time that new music was recorded for Star Trek was for Plato's Stepchildren, and otherwise they just reused all the other music that they recorded. But they used most of the music from the session for Spock's brain, and I think the music for season 3 is really great, and they use just a great music cue to kick off the teaser for The World is Hollow. Yep.
And we lock phasers on the missiles and we blow them up. This was all pretty easy. This wasn't a terribly big threat. We want to find out where those missiles came from. And then we cut, and this is this thing we talked about throughout, this screenwriting technique of enter late, leave early.
I am a nurse first, Dr. McCoy, and a member of the crew of the Enterprise second.
You're excused. You may return to your quarters.
No, I'm sorry, Doctor. I have called the captain, and I'll wait until he comes.
Then he kind of gets his composure.
Please, Christine. I promise you I'll give the captain a full report.
And Kirk has already walked into sickbay. He's seeing the whole thing, and he's shocked. I mean, he's seen McCoy and Spock go at it, but he's never really seen McCoy go at it after, with Chapel, even though she argues every little diagnosis with him.
I've just completed the standard physical examinations for the entire crew.
Excellent. What's the emergency?
The crew is fit. I found nothing unusual, with one exception.
Serious.
Terminal.
He says, who is it?
He has 1 year to live at the most.
Who is it?
The ship's chief medical officer.
This is really where Shatner is really good. It's a real dialed back.
I'll be most effective on the job in the time left if you'll keep this to yourself.
And what struck me more this time watching this, like I said, after our recent deep dive on the empath, where we had such strong emotional reactions to it, is the look of pain on Kirk's face. And he just like looks down in defeat. Like, we just saved this guy from the Vians. We just talked the Vians into saving McCoy and saving his life, putting our lives on the line, Spock's, Kirk's, even Jem's. And now to get past all that, and he has this incurable disease called xenopolycythemia. And it's just, he says, there's no cure. He's not going to save him this time. And just the look on his face, the pain is so much more poignant, knowing that what just happened and where they are now.
I think it's a great scene. I think it's a great teaser. I think it represents this thing we've been talking about throughout, is the good episodes of Star Trek, the really good ones, have emotional content. Well, here is the emotional content. McCoy is going to die. And what I really like too is that he is in denial. He is not going to deal with this emotion. He didn't say, Jim, I'm dying. He didn't say, he said the chief medical officer. And then he says in a very official sort of way, I'll be most effective on the job with the time left if you keep this to yourself. He is not only is he not dealing with the emotions, he's telling his friend Kirk, please don't ask me about this. I can't deal with it right. Let's keep this totally on an official level. I think it's all really, really good. It's
very, very good. And also the thing, Steve, is that because we've been covering this series chronologically in production order, and that we're seeing a through line to the evolution of the characters, but also most importantly, the evolution of the friendship between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, which is why seeing that friendship put to the test in not just the empath, but also the Tholian web, where they're putting it all on the line to save Captain Kirk, right? So now here we are, another episode that's deeply personal. I mean, of course, we know McCoy isn't really going to die, but still, it is the relationship that they have, where the deeper emotions that we feel, the sympathy that we feel, and the empathy we feel for their relationship as a whole is much deeper now, because it has been earned by the previous 2.5 years of this series.
You just made me think of a thing I want to point out quickly that people don't generally think about. People think when you're watching a thing to find out what happens, which of course we are to some degree. But you said, of course, we know that McCoy's not going to die. And that's true. And what's so interesting to me is that if knowing that he wasn't going to die had any effect on us, we wouldn't watch these things over and over again and go through the same emotions over and over again. You and I know what happens at the end of every episode of Star Trek, and yet we are involved in the good ones just the way we were the first time.
And I think the reason for that, Steve, is it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. It is absolutely about the journey. It is seeing the way these three characters in particular work it out, help each other out, have each other's backs, strengthen their relationship. And those three guys, I mean, the actors, Shatner, Nimoy, and D. Kelley, their chemistry was just incredibly powerful and dynamic and fantastic. So it's the journey of seeing them go through this together, especially as this episode progresses.
At the beginning of Act 1, the first thing we hear is a captain's log. And in this captain's log, he says that he's informed Starfleet of McCoy's illness and that he has requested an immediate replacement.
An immediate replacement. Who do you think that replacement could possibly be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. Dr. Mbenga? I don't know. Who?
Well, it could be Dr. Mbenga, maybe Dr. Boyce.
Oh, Dr.
Still
Boyce, sure.
around. You know, he's familiar with the Enterprise, having served under Captain Pike. But just some things to think about. I wonder who they would have gotten to replace Dr. McCoy if, in fact, McCoy did not make it.
I just think it's weird because the last thing McCoy said was, I can keep serving on the Enterprise, until I die.
Mm-hmm, right.
And this seems just strangely callous of Kirk to just immediately request a replacement. That just seems weird to me.
It does see, I did notice that too. I did think about that too in the back of my head, but at the same time, Kirk is the captain of a starship with 428 people, and he has to look out and do what's best for his crew.
I get that, but I just don't feel like this is what I feel like in a lot of this episode, which is that there's a really interesting thing and it's even done really well, but then they don't really deal with it. You know what I mean? Like, It's just like, it's kind of just happens and then we move on,
Yeah, fair. Absolutely fair.
Because the decision to call for a replacement for one of his best friends and the guy that saved his life uncounted times, that's a big decision, but it all happens just off camera. He just says, oh yeah, I'm going to do that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The Enterprise is looking for where those missiles came from, and what we come across is a big, huge rock in space.
Okay, so a couple things to point out, Steve, is that when you're watching the opening moments of For the World is Hollow, you'll notice you see Captain Kirk exit the turbo lift, and he goes to talk to Spock, and then Scotty, standing right in the back, and you don't hear what they're saying, but what you are seeing is a lift of the exact same scene that opened up the teaser.
Oh.
Where Kirk walked onto the bridge and they're talking about the missiles, and Scotty mentions it's chemically fueled to boot. But the reason for this is because the scene that we saw in the beginning of the teaser, where the Enterprise fires its phasers on the missiles, that scene was supposed to open Act 1. All the teaser was supposed to be was supposed to open with McCoy and Chapel arguing and Kirk walking in and being told that McCoy is dying. That was the teaser. And Fred Freiberger actually made the right move of moving the bit with the missiles from the beginning of Act 1 to the beginning of the teaser to give the teaser a much, much bigger push. And I think that while it's like two different stories going on there, it still does make the teaser much more effective. And all those teasers, most of them anyway, were really, really good. But anyway, then they needed the coverage to open up Act 1, so they just lifted the scene.
That's fascinating. And what's so funny is it just flows perfectly into this thing that we've been talking about of good Star Trek episodes have emotional content. We just talked about that. And an adventure story and interesting science fiction ideas. If you had just had the teaser as it was written, you would have had emotional content, but not the adventure.
Right.
And so what they did was make them have at least those two. And now we're heading towards the interesting science fiction idea, which is there's this asteroid and that's where the missiles came from. And then they realize as they look at it that the asteroid is not in orbit around anything. It's going through this system on its own power. It's a spaceship. And
the footage that they used of the asteroid for the original visual effects were clearly lifted from the visual effects for the Paradise Syndrome.
Right.
And in earlier versions of For the World is Hollow, it was not McCoy who falls ill. It was Scotty who falls ill with an irreversible red blood cell condition. And Scotty is played much angrier in this earlier version than he ever was in an episode of the original series. And it's actually Scotty who repairs Yonada's guidance system and gets it back on course. But with his second draft script, the Larts changed it from Scotty to McCoy, who's dying of the disease, but Scotty will still get his love story to come in The Lights of Zetar.
Yes, he will.
For better or worse.
Anyway, they do some scans and they see no life forms, despite the fact that it's got a breathable atmosphere in this hollow spaceship. And then they plot its course out and find out this rock is going to run right into an inhabited planet.
Darren 5, population 3,724,000,000, which is interesting because when this episode was filmed in August of 1968, 3,724,000,000 was not that far off from the population of the Earth. Wow. Of course, now that's doubled because we're at 7 billion, but it's going to impact Darren 5 in 396 days. So the Enterprise is on a mission now to stop that from happening.
And so Kirk and Spock are heading into the transporter room. It's going to be just the two of them who are beaming down, and then who is waiting for them in the transporter room but Dr. McCoy.
Dr. McCoy, Mr. Spock and I will handle this.
Without me, Jim, you'd never find your way back.
Now, why aren't there any security guards? Well, because they didn't have the budget for all those extras. And what's interesting is that never before have we seen Kirk say, no, you know what, Doc, Spock and I will handle this. You don't have to be here. But Spock didn't pick up on that. I'm surprised that Spock didn't notice, like, what are you talking about?
Had the same thought. They should have cut to Spock. There should have been a shot of his reaction to that moment, and there's not.
Mm-hmm.
And McCoy convinces him to go. And this is one of the weird inconsistencies is that McCoy said, I'm going to be healthy right up until the end. I could just keep working. But then that's not what we see in the course of this episode. And that's not how Kirk treats him.
Right. Well, it's not how Kirk treats him. Of course, that's totally understandable. Kirk is being really looking out for his friend. But when McCoy falls under physical duress, then it's the ravages of the disease that are preventing him from recovering as fast as Spock and Kirk.
We're down on the quote unquote surface of the planet. And that's what they think. They say, you'd swear we were on the surface of a planet. And they start looking around and they find these big, huge tubes sticking out of the ground.
So this scene on the surface of Yonada was filmed on stage 10 on the Paramount lot. And the cylinder entrances that you see, the two closest to us were built, life size, but the two behind them were built much, much smaller. And the camera was placed strategically to sort of give it like an illusion of distance. But this scene in particular was filmed on stage 10, where the next scene was filmed across town, and we'll get to that in a moment.
That technique, by the way, is called forced perspective, and it's used constantly in set design to make things seem bigger or farther away than they actually are.
Interesting.
A good example of it, by the way, is go to Disneyland or Disney World. They use it all the time. The castles, the buildings, all of them look taller than they really are because, like, if you're looking at a 3-story building, each story, the windows are smaller. So it seems as if they look farther away than they really are. Interesting.
That's why the castle looks bigger than it really is.
It looks bigger than it really is. It's called forced perspective. But then those tubes open up and a bunch of dudes come out and a woman, and we're right into the middle of a fight, which our guys lose.
Our guys lose pretty bad. I mean, even Spock, there's a moment where Spock is like trying to, give the guy the neck pinch, and someone comes behind him with the sword and knocks him out. And during the fight, McCoy just stands up quickly and talk about love at first sight. He locks eyes with this woman and she locks eyes back with him. There's clearly an attraction, something about the other person right then and there just completely locks. But McCoy is his attention is distracted, and then he gets knocked out. And this is where the ravages of the xenopolycythemia prevents him from coming to as fast as Kirk and Spock. But the woman, who we will find out her name is Natira, is played by Katherine Woodville, who was on TV shows like The Avengers, The Saint, It Takes a Thief, Mannix, The Rockford Files, and Days of Our Lives. But it was during the Avengers where she met her first husband, Patrick Macnee, and they were married from 1965 to 1969. But it was her third husband who she married from 1979 to his death in 2006. Her third husband was Eddie Albert.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's really good, and I think she holds a lot of power.
Yep.
And feels like the leader of this planet, 100%.
These are weapons.
Of a sort. Weapons, communication devices. Let me go to my friend.
He's concerned about McCoy, who gets up and seems okay. And she introduces herself as Natira, the High Priestess of the people, and says, "Welcome to the world of Yonada."
Kirk says, "I can't say I think much of your welcome." And she's like, "Take them."
Yeah. And then we get a really weird shot through the slats of the spiral staircase that I'm sure is the same spiral staircase we saw in the Empath.
You are correct.
And we come into Yonada. I think the costumes are fairly silly for some of them. Natira's is a typical,
Bill Tice, yeah.
Bill Tice sexy costume. And we walk to the entrance of the room of the Oracle, where we see these diamond-shaped plaques with some kind of writing on them. She gestures, the doors open. We walk in. She kneels in front of this altar. They force our guys to also kneel. And then, there's some things, there are conventions in film, and sometimes you accept them and sometimes you don't. In this, one of the conventions is that I could be 3 feet away from you and whisper, or even speak in a relatively normal voice, and for some reason you don't hear anything I'm saying.
Yeah, right.
She called this the world. These people don't know they're on a spaceship.
Well, everybody should be able to hear that. There are guards standing like right above them who poke them to get them to stop talking, but no one actually can hear it.
So this is the Oracle room, which was designed by Matt Jeffries, the set designer, the legendary set designer for Star Trek. And he actually said that next to Trelane's lair from the Squire of Gothos, the temple in the Oracle room from For the World is Hollow is one of his very favorite sets that he designed, which is interesting. So I mentioned how when they were on the surface of Yonada, Steve, that was filmed on stage 10 on the Paramount lot. Well, all of the underground scenes, like this one, were actually filmed across town in Culver City at Culver Studios on stage 8. And the reason I bring that up is because Culver Studios is where they shot The Cage and Where No Man Has Gone before they moved to Desilu.
Oh, interesting. That's very interesting.
Wait,
why did they go over to Culver? I don't understand.
They needed the room and they didn't have it on the Paramount lot.
Well, so now we got several reasons why they went over budget, because if you're shooting on someone else's lot, you're renting space.
And they have to get there and bring all the wardrobe and the actors. Yep, yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. I also really like this set of the Oracle room. I like it, and I like it better than Trelane's. I think it's a cooler space for me.
Yeah.
O Oracle of the people, most perfect and wise, strangers have come to our world. They bear instruments we do not understand.
She asks who they are, and Kirk stands. We get some intros.
I love this. He stands up, and with his back arch, looking to the horizon. Shatner, Kirk just gives that usual Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise, and she says, "Why are you here?" And Kirk goes, "We come in friendship." And then there is what sounds like a thunder. A thunderclap, and you'll hear this voice say,
"Then learn what it means to be our enemy before you learn what it means to be our friend."
Then there's this zap that looks really painful that hits Kirk, Spock, and McCoy all at the same time, and they just fall to the ground. Now, did you know, Steve, that the voice of the Oracle is none other than James Doohan?
That was my guess. Yes, I didn't know because I want to be surprised when we do these episodes, but I kind of guessed that was who that was.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is a pretty brutal way to bring people. I mean, they just beamed down to this place. They got beat up. They got brought to the Oracle room, and then immediately, shocked to really powerfully and knocked out. This is not a very welcoming place, Yonada.
It's also, I think. And I never thought about this before. Honestly, Steve, there have been so many times where I would watch a new episode to prep for our next podcast for Enterprise Incidents. And I have this thought that I never thought about so many times, which is obviously for no question one of the great rewards of doing this. But the Oracle, clearly, it is a mechanical thing. It is a computer, and it made me sort of tie the Oracle of Yonada to Landru
Me too.
and Val from the Apple.
Oh, I hadn't thought about Vol. I've always thought about Landru because in the end, we're going to do exactly what we did with Landru, which is go through from one room where we're seeing the Oracle to the computer room behind the stage.
Yeah.
So I've always thought about that. I hadn't thought about Vol, but this is this area where we're reusing ideas in ways that where in the first season, I felt like we were exploring ideas in different ways, and now I feel like we're kind of just reusing ideas.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's and the thing is where the reveal of Landru, even though we know it's coming, the reveal is so dramatic, whereas the reveal, I don't think, of the Oracle that we certainly know, I mean, is a computer. And in the beginning of Return of the Archons, we see the image of Landru, and we're not sure yet. We think it's actually a flesh and blood character, but I don't know, the impact, the takeaway, the reveal, sort of the shock of the Oracle is not nearly as effective as Return of the Archons.
Well, and this is the thing. There's so many things in this episode that just don't quite make sense. Like, why are they doing that? Why is the Oracle doing this?
Same feeling. Yep.
Yeah.
Same thing.
I don't understand exactly what's going on.
Like for example, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I thought about that. That's another thing I just never really thought of. I just sort of would watch the episode and just go with it. But like, why won't the Oracle tell them that they're on a spaceship?
That's the biggest one.
Like,
well,
why?
Why don't they know? So
Right.
Spoiler alert, 10,000 years ago, the system was blowing up and they loaded a whole bunch of people on an escape spaceship that looks like an asteroid to go to a new planet, right? That's the plot.
Yeah.
Well, those people that got on the spaceship, they knew they were getting on a spaceship, right?
Right.
Why do these people no longer know it? And why is that a problem?
Well, okay. So on one hand, since they've been on this journey for 10,000 years,
yes,
maybe through generations of saying, don't tell anybody. And then before you know it, you get to just a whole new generation that does not know that they're on a spaceship. But regardless,
but why?
What they do know, but like the Natira knows that they are on a journey, and when they reach, they're going to reach their destination. Well, how are they on a journey? They must be on a spaceship if they're on a journey.
And it's not just that they don't know; it's that you will get killed if you ask any questions about this. Is really serious.
Yeah, why?
Why? It doesn't make a lick of sense to me.
I agree.
Yeah. I think one of the weirdest, and I'm assuming this is just Bill Shatner's ego, but the fact that he has to be the last person knocked out and the first person who wakes up in everything is just dumb. And now that we've seen it many, many times, whether it was Spock's brain and everything, and it's like, look, Spock would wake up first. He's the most resistant. He's the toughest.
That's true.
This just doesn't make sense. But needless to say, Kirk is already awake. He wakes Spock up. McCoy is still out. Kirk is like slapping his face trying to wake him up.
The doctor must have received an excessively large electrical shock.
No, that's not it.
Nothing else could have caused this, Captain. At least, nothing that has happened here.
After thinking, and I do like that he has to think about this a bit.
You're right, Spock. The shock is serious because of McCoy's weakened condition.
May I ask precisely what is troubling the doctor?
I don't think he would have told you himself, but I think you should know now. It's xenopolycythemia.
So McCoy in the teaser says, I'll be most effective on the job if you keep this to yourself. So in his captain's log, he tells Starfleet, and now, they just beam over to Yonada, and now he's telling Spock. So, I mean, I get that Kirk's heart is in the right place, but maybe not the best person to tell a secret to.
Well, I think that at this point, our lives are on jeopardy. He has to tell Spock. I totally agree with that. But this one works for me. The Starfleet one is weird, and McCoy wakes up and, is obviously in pain. He asks if Spock's all right because he's trying to play it off because he doesn't know that Spock knows at this point.
Right.
And he says,
"Oh, that Oracle really got to me. I must be especially susceptible to its magic spells."
And as he says that, as he's saying the word magic spells, he looks down to his left arm and he sees that Spock is still comforting him, holding his arm. He looks at Spock's hand. He looks back at Spock. Spock is just looking directly at him. McCoy turns to Kirk, and Kirk just, again, restrained.
Spock knows.
I just think that this is such a beautiful scene. And again, it is an emotion that is earned because of everything the three of them have been through up to this point. So when you see all these moments where Spock and McCoy are going at it, usually because McCoy is going after Spock like he did in the Tholian Web and in Bread and Circuses and in the Paradise Syndrome and Gamester to Triskelion and so on and so on. And here you see Spock really comforting him. So through all those battles and arguments, you could see that Spock really cares about McCoy. And I think that there's no words from Spock. It's the way you see it and then you feel it without the words.
This is why say this is a mixed episode for me. I think this moment is fantastic.
Great.
I think it's so good, and because it's all done without words, and because it's the Spock knows, and then McCoy looks at Spock and knows that he knows because Spock is comforting. And by the way, this is where I was thinking about the empath, because it's in the empath where Spock is the doctor for wounded McCoy, and McCoy says you have a good bedside manner, and he is helping him up in the same way as he is here. And so I think this moment is great, and it really shows like beneath all of the fighting and bickering and all that stuff, they love each other.
Yep.
And it totally, totally works.
It
there are other elements
works
in this episode that I like, I don't, what the hell's going on?
I agree.
Informing these people they are on a ship may be in violation of the prime directive of Starfleet Command.
And he says, well, the people of Yonada may be changed by the knowledge, but it's better than exterminating them, or the 3 billion people on, Darren 5.
Both are quite logical.
and the thing, this is what I think the prime directive should be, which is we don't want to interfere, but if everyone's going to die, like we should interfere, you know?
And look, Kirk makes his point in both cases. Unless we do something, the people of Yonada will die and the people of Darren 5 will die. So that is the prime directive does not apply here.
But here's what's weird about this episode is we go, okay, we should tell the people, we're going to tell the people. They don't. That's not what they do. They don't tell anybody until we're at the very end of the episode.
Well, I think, I see that. But at the same time, I feel like, well, what is he going to get up on a pedestal and say, ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement to make?
Natira's going to, we got a scene before this, but after what happens next, Natira's going to come in. He could tell her.
Right. But there's also, there is a massive population on Yonada, and, you don't want to cause a catastrophe, create a panic until you have to. So I get he still has 396 days before it reaches Darren 5. So okay, so what's the best way to go about doing this? That's where I think Kirk's head is.
Well, if they said that, I would go, okay, but they don't say that. He doesn't right. He doesn't say, Captain, I think informing the people could violate the prime directive. He goes, you're right. Let's do this slowly. We don't want to cause a panic. He says we need to inform them, and what they also, and we'll get to it when we get to it, because what happens right now is this little old man comes in.
Gentlemen, I believe we have a visitor.
This little man should look really familiar, because not only was he in Return of the Archons, another episode that deals with a computer controlling a society, but he was also the head of the expedition leader, who was really an illusion in The Cage. The gentleman's name is John Lormer. But so between The Cage, Return of the Archons, and technically the Menagerie Part 1, he was in quite a few episodes of the original series.
Yeah. And the first thing he does is give them something that will help with the pain that they got from being punished by the Oracle. And as he starts to talk, there's a music sting and he's hit with some pain.
So they say also.
You could just see that wince.
Yep.
And so let me ask you a question, Steve. This guy has obviously lived a very long, full life on Yonada.
Mm-hmm.
And here are these three strangers. Why does he choose to sort of let down his guard with these three strangers?
Well, I think the first reason is that we want someone to say the title of the episode.
Yeah.
So he comes out to say the title of the episode. I mean, I think it's motivatable. I think the idea that you had some profound experience as a young man and you've never been able to talk about it to anybody because you would die.
Right.
And finally, there are people who might understand because they come from somewhere else and aren't part of this culture, that there would be a strong pull to say the thing that you've never spoken aloud. I can see that as a motivation.
Many years ago, I climbed the mountains, even though it is forbidden.
Another wince, yep.
Why is it forbidden?
I am not sure. But things are not as they teach us.
And it gets another hit and then says, scared.
For the world is hollow, and I have touched the sky.
You know, I made jokes about it, and sometimes I really don't like when they use a title in the episode. I like this one.
Yeah, I think that his delivery, John Lormer's delivery of that, the desperation of it, and I know I asked the question, like, why is he telling Kirk, Spock, McCoy about this? They're strangers, but I think it's because they are strangers. I think it's because he sees that they are not of this world, and maybe they can help. But what struck me watching it this time, Steve, is this line: things are not as they teach us. When was this episode filmed? August of 1968.
Yeah.
What was going on?
Civil rights movements, Vietnam, all sorts of stuff is going on.
Exactly. And so much of what the government was telling us, especially when it came to Vietnam, was not as they taught us. And it was right around this point when the truth actually came out about Vietnam that it was not a winnable situation. But at this point, to hear those words, things are not as they teach us. When I was rewatching this, again, this was another moment where that line just kind of came and went all those years, decades, watching this episode, but not this time.
Well, this goes to, again, why this is a mixed episode. Because part of this episode, you could say, is about a conspiracy to keep the people in the dark about what reality is. And I think you're absolutely right. And even today, there are people fighting about what should be taught in schools and what the truth is. And I'm not taking any sides on which one I think is correct. And I actually think truth is a complicated thing, but like, we don't deal with that in this episode. Like there's no Natira going, oh no, I've been lied to my entire life. What is reality? We don't deal with that. That's not really what the episode is about. But in this moment, that's profoundly what it's about. The Oracle kills this old man because he knows the truth.
But what happens when Natira starts to believe the truth towards the end of this episode? She starts feeling the pain from the Oracle because she is starting to question the Oracle about the truth. So there is a lot more to this episode that I ever considered when it comes to questioning authority, questioning the truth, wanting to know the truth when you think that you are being lied to. So there is definitely a subtlety there that I never was so subtle. I never gave it a second thought, but not.
Well, but that's the problem. I mean, that's why it doesn't work. If it's so subtle that you didn't give it a second thought until you, a Star Trek expert, watched it seriously decades after many, many times, you go, well, then it didn't work. You know what I mean?
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. But he goes down, he dies. We see something red glowing at his temple.
He said it was forbidden to climb the mountains.
Yes, of course it is. Because if you did, you'd touch the sky and find out that you were living on a big ball. Not a planet, but a spaceship. And that knowledge seems to be forbidden.
And that is when Natira enters and sees the old man, asks what happened. Here's another thing that's really good, which is the thing we talked about of Kirk in the really good episodes, is his speed in adjusting to a situation and lying. He doesn't say, this guy said the world is hollow and I touched the sky. He says, I don't know, he just came in and screamed and died.
Forgive him, for he was an old man. And old men are sometimes foolish, but it is written that those of the people who sin or speak evil shall be punished.
So she knows that he did something that caused him to get killed. And they take him away, and in come some women with trays and wine and food. And McCoy sits up, and she looks at him and says,
You do not seem well. It is distressing to me.
and this is this thing that you mentioned from one look at that first time they saw each other, that it's love at first sight, and everything follows from there, and it doesn't make any sense. I think, and it's so weird because I think the actors do a great job, and I think some of the lines are great, but I do not buy that this love at first sight thing that's happening.
Okay.
You know,
I want to agree with you, because as much as I was very moved by their relationship after the love at first sight thing,
yeah,
I did not buy the actual love at first sight moment. I don't know. It just didn't ring true. I mean, I get it was a dramatic way. It was in the middle of a fight, you know, and he gets knocked out because he's distracted when he sees her. And I think that both actors are terrific. Like,
they're doing a great job
as the episode progresses. But I didn't buy it. It felt contrived.
Well, it's the difference between what you're trying to tell the audience to believe, they fall in love at first sight, and what actually is going on. What actually is going on is that you showed up, and for no reason at all, this woman ordered her men to beat you up, then took you to this oracle where you were shocked to within an inch of your life. Then the next time you see her, she walks in, sees a dead old man on the floor, and says he was foolish.
Yeah.
Why are you falling in love with this woman? This doesn't seem like a nice situation.
It is the will of the Oracle that you now be treated as honored guests.
It's like, oh, thanks, Oracle.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Kirk picks up on it just from these couple of looks and the fact that she was distressed that McCoy didn't feel well.
You seem to be the special favorite.
Indeed, Doctor. The young lady did show a marked preference for your company.
I'm like, did she? I think you're reading a lot of stuff into that. But I do like McCoy saying,
well, now, nobody can blame her for that, can they?
Personally, I find the lady's taste questionable, but she obviously prefers you, and you obviously don't seem to mind.
So is he joking or is he jealous?
I think a little from column A and a little from column B.
Yeah.
If you could arrange to be alone with the young lady, Spock and I would be left alone to find the power controls of this world.
And this is where I go, they literally just said we should tell them that they're on a spaceship. But now they're saying, you distract her while we sneak around and get to the power, the control room.
We are very interested in your world.
That pleases us.
Good. Then you wouldn't mind if we looked around.
Not at all. The people know of you now.
So McCoy coughs now. Did he actually cough, or is that him trying to be weaker in order to say that he has to stay so he can spend time with her?
Great question. I always saw it that he actually really did cough and then used the moment to say, I'll stay behind while you guys go snoop around and see what you can find. Because when she says to him, are you well enough to go? And he goes, perhaps not. Kirk and Spock kind of look at him and go, good job.
Yeah. And so she's like, yeah, so you guys go walk around and he and I will sit together and talk.
Thank you. And thank you for taking care of Dr. McCoy.
Not at all. We shall make him well.
We shall make him well. So what does she mean by that? Because the inflection of those words, we shall make him well, not, well, no, we'll take care of him, but we shall make him well, goes a lot further than we'll comfort him. So does she already know that there are these archives with the Oracle that could possibly cure him, and that is why they'll make him well? Because he looks back at her and she goes from like giving him like an admirable, loving look to like one of like, all seriousness now, like, we will make you well. There's something there.
I never interpreted it because she doesn't know that has a fatal disease yet. So I never interpreted it that way. I always interpreted it as, I am so into you right now. I will make you well.
I see.
That's how I always saw it.
Uh-huh.
Which again doesn't make sense to me, that this love at first sight thing.
How did the Oracle punish the old man?
I cannot tell you now.
There is some way the Oracle knows what you say, isn't there?
What we say, what we think.
And I'm kind of going, there's a lot of times in Star Trek where there's people that aren't there punishing you for things you're saying or thinking, all the way back to the cage, but also Gamesters of Triskelion. Like this is sort of this thing that we've gone through many times.
I did not know you would be hurt so badly.
It's all right. I suppose we had to learn the power of the Oracle.
By the way, one thing I noticed here, I've noticed throughout this episode, the lighting in general is much brighter, much less contrast than we had when Jerry Finnerman was there, except this shot of her right here, where it looks like old Jerry Finnerman's. Lots of shadows and contrast. It's very dramatic lighting. But most of the episode's not like that.
Well, from the point that Finnerman leaves at the end of the Empath, I mean, even the Tholian Web, you could see that Al Francis, the new cinematographer, was trying to just sort of like, it ain't broke. I'm not going to bother fixing it yet. But from that point forward, with this episode and certainly the rest of the series, the lighting is very different. Everything is much, much brighter. The dramatic lighting that Finnerman did for those 2.5 years, which gave Star Trek its unique look and was almost like a character unto itself, is gone. And, over the years when people have said, oh, I wish Star Trek would have continued on for a 4th year, I'm glad it didn't. Because if it did, the quality would have been, if they were lucky, it would have matched the 3rd season. But since the quality of the 3rd season was not like the first 2, all that would have done was further dilute the series. You have 2 great seasons like season 1 and season 2, and an okay season like season 3, and a season that is better than people give it credit for, but still not as great as it is. I'm glad that they did not do a 4th season, because I'll take 2 great seasons and one decent one over another season that would have been just decent, because like the lighting wasn't as good or the budget wasn't as good. And, but you're right about the lighting. It does look brighter, except when they shoot Natira.
And then she says, and this is where it's just like, really?
Is there a woman for you?
No, there isn't.
Does McCoy find me attractive?
Oh, yes. Yes, I do.
And my note here is, this is totally unbelievable.
Agreed.
Even though both actors are really good.
That's why I went with it.
I hope you men of space, of other worlds, hold truth as dear as we do.
We do.
And I'm thinking, you're lying to her right now. Like, Kirk and Spock, are sneaking around trying to mess around with the control room. You're lying to her at this moment.
I wish you to stay here on Yonada as my mate.
Whoa.
my line here, my note here is, whoa, slow your roll, babe.
Yeah, like, and the look that he gives her is like in shock. Like, are you really professing your love and telling me to stay here as your mate? Like, he can't believe it.
Well, and here's what's so weird. I see no reason for him to be attracted to her other than that she's a beautiful woman. And I see absolutely even less reason for her to be attracted to him, even though I love Dr. McCoy. She doesn't know anything about Dr. McCoy.
That's right.
If she had seen him do something McCoy-like, if he had shown his personality to her in any way, maybe I would buy this.
Yeah.
But that being said, the lines are great.
But we're strangers to each other.
But is not that the nature of men and women? That the pleasure is in the learning of each other?
I love that.
That's a nice line. Yeah. It's such a conflicting feeling watching the scene, because it really requires a big leap of faith to accept it. But then again, when the performances of these actors and what they're saying, the dialogue is really quite lovely. So you go, okay, I buy it now.
I'm going to call this episode, it's like a roller coaster for me of, that's really good. Oh, I don't get what the hell's happening. No, that's really good.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, we're going to go down on the roller coaster again, because this next scene with Kirk and Spock is totally useless as they're walking through the corridors talking about that they're on a spaceship, which we already knew, and how many generations have been on this spaceship. And the one thing about what I will call a pretty useless scene, watch it again and watch the extras in the background, because they are terrible.
Well, you know what? I always notice the extras behind them, just kind of like looking at them. I'll have to go back and rewatch it. Are they like just not convincing in their curiosity?
They were they were given really bad directions, I think, because it looks like they're kind of don't know where they're going or why they're there, and they're sort of looking at Kirk and Spock but not talking, and it just doesn't look natural.
Oh, okay.
Bad extras. You should talk to my partner on the Cinephiles, John Roca. That is like a hobby of his, of pointing out bad extras. It's a very strange skill. But we're back to Natira and McCoy.
The people, in the fullness of time, will reach a new world. Rich, green, lovely to the eyes, and of a goodness that will fill the hearts of the people with tears of joy.
This is what you said before. They know they're going somewhere. Why don't they know they're on a spaceship?
Right. I mean, don't they think that, well, if we're in motion and we're not orbiting a planet, where the hell's the light and the warmth coming from?
Right. Well, where are we going? How can one world go to another world?
Yeah. I agree.
Oh, if you only knew how I needed some kind of future, Natira.
You have lived a lonely life?
Yes. Very lonely.
DeForest Kelley is great in that.
Yes,
moment.
He's great in this moment, despite just the sort of go with it that you have to take to buy into all this. But we are now hearing how lonely it has been for McCoy after we've seen how lonely it has been for Kirk and Spock.
Well,
the burden of command, obviously, keeping Kirk, away from a real, true relationship, and of course, Spock's loneliness being the only person of his kind on the Enterprise, and trying to stay true to his Vulcan half, creating and of course seeing that loneliness in The Naked Time, and hearing Spock as Collis, Ambassador Collis, and Is There in Truth No Beauty, talk about how lonely you are, and now you're hearing how lonely McCoy is. Like, loneliness is a common theme for our three biggest people on Star Trek.
And here's why I think this, even though it works in the moment, because DeForest Kelley delivers the line beautifully and it's a great moment, this is why this doesn't work for me, which is that how early in Star Trek did you know that Kirk is dealing with the pressure of command and his inability to have love and relationships and sacrifices he's made? How early in Star Trek did you know that was a thing?
I would say I was pretty in tune to that from a very young age, when I was just kind of getting into it.
I don't mean early in your age. I mean, how early in the production of Star Trek? At what episode did you get that?
The Naked Time.
Definitely by The Naked Time.
Sure.
And maybe even a little bit earlier, maybe even a little bit with An Enemy Within, maybe a little, you know what I mean? Like, we got that right away. How early in watching Star Trek, not your age, but the show, did you get that there was a conflict between Spock's emotional half and his logical half?
Also, The Naked Time.
Definitely The Naked Time, if not earlier, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that by the time you get to This Side of Paradise, or City on the Edge of Forever, or the Paradise Syndrome, where we're going to deal with that thing, it's really, really well established.
Mm-hmm. It's also earned.
It's really earned, so that when we have the relationship with Miramani, or we have the relationship in This Side of Paradise, I have deep, powerful, emotional connection to dealing with this thing. How early in watching Star Trek did you realize that McCoy was a very lonely person?
The Man Trap.
Really?
Well,
maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. You know what? Okay. You're right. I'm going to take most of what I said back. That is in The Man Trap. The Man Trap is not a very good episode of Star Trek.
Right. Agreed.
And I never think of McCoy, other than The Man Trap and this moment, as lonely.
Okay, that's the problem.
The conflicts the Kirk and Spock conflicts, the internal conflicts, they are built in and really powerful.
And they're also touched upon routinely throughout the series. Whereas, The Man Trap may have been the 6th episode to film, but it was the first episode to air. And with the first episode that aired on September 8th, 1966, you're seeing that McCoy's lonely, and he's, falling back in love with Nancy because he's lonely, and they had a thing in the past. But then up until this moment now, with For the World is Hollow, you don't hear about McCoy's loneliness. You don't see any of it. It's like, it's there at the very beginning, and then it's like put on the back burner until For the World is Hollow.
And then are we ever going to see it again?
We would have seen it again. Would have seen it again because, okay, just jumping ahead, when we get to The Way to Eden, which is not a good episode, the original story for The Way to Eden, this hippie that comes on the Enterprise is named Joanna. And Joanna is McCoy's daughter, and she falls in love with Captain Kirk. That story was written by D.C. Fontana, but then after the Enterprise incident, D.C. Fontana said, okay, bye, I don't like the way things are going on Star Trek. So that episode was completely rewritten as The Way to Eden. The McCoy's daughter angle was taken out of it completely. But if that episode had gone forward as it was intended to, as McCoy's daughter, you would have seen another aspect of McCoy's loneliness because of his estrangement with his daughter.
Well, that is fascinating. And this is the thing, is like we have this great moment where he says, very lonely. We never really we don't even deal with it that much in this episode.
Right.
That's just me on the roller coaster. Wow, great moment. What is that about? You know?
Yeah.
There's something I need to tell you.
There is nothing you need to say.
But there is.
Then tell me, if the telling is such a need.
Great lines.
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah,
I totally get why you're into this Natira person now.
Yeah. And he says, I have a disease for which there is no cure. I have 1 year to live.
And I love the way, again, I'm on the roller coaster. This I love. She says,
until I saw you, there was nothing in my heart. It sustained my life, but nothing more. Now it sings. I could be happy to have that feeling for a day, a week, a month, a year. Whatever the creators hold in store for us.
Lovely romantic lines.
Yep.
But as romantic as Miramani in the Paradise Syndrome, the difference is, what the hell about McCoy is making her heart sing? What has he done to give her this reaction? There's nothing, you know?
Right.
And the music builds. I think it's the music from the Empath.
It is the music from the Empath, and just like it did in the Empath, the use of that score, of those music cues from the Empath and For the World is Hollow, especially because there is a connection between the emotions we feel in the Empath to the emotions we feel in For the World is Hollow. It gets me all the time, I gotta say. That music, it really does.
It's beautiful music.
Yep.
We're at the outside of the Oracle room where there are those diamond-shaped panels with writing on them.
The writing is definitely Fabrini, Captain. I recognize it.
Fabrini. Didn't the Fabrini sun go nova and destroy its planets?
Yes, toward the end, the Fabrini people lived underground, as these people do, to protect themselves.
Wait, how do you know what happened on some strange planet 10,000 years ago that was destroyed?
Well, Spock knows everything. I mean, he's always correcting, he knows what quadrotriticale is, down to the T. But the trope of a star going nova, we heard about that happening in the Empath, and now they're talking about this history of the Fabrini. Their sun went nova, and then we're going to hear about Beta Niobe from All Our Yesterdays is about to go nova, and that's why everyone from Sarpedon went into its past.
Anyway, Spock does some gestures, and the doors open, and they go inside. And apparently the Oracle doesn't know they're there, even though the Oracle can read everybody's minds and see everything that's going on everywhere else. It seems strange that it doesn't know when someone walks into its room.
And that is because it was when Natira leaned on the podium that activated the Oracle. And that's when the Oracle noticed everything that was going on. So it's almost like an on switch. So because they're not standing on there, they didn't activate the Oracle. That's why they can kind of move around the room and not be detected.
I get it. I think it's thin, but I get it. I understand. For the Oracle that can read people's minds and hear everything everybody says in this whole place, it seems strange that there's an on switch in its room where it actually is.
Interesting point. Yep.
Yeah. But they're looking around and they see this other kind of obelisk, and on it is a diagram of a solar system, and that is the Fabrini solar system. 8
planets and a star, and that's where they learn that this spaceship has been in flight for 10,000 years, and they're snooping around, and then they hear the door open and Natira walks in. So Kirk and Spock take cover, and they hear a conversation between Natira and the Oracle,
where she kneels on the thing, which we thought was the on switch, but the Oracle still hasn't noticed Kirk and Spock yet. because now it doesn't notice them until she stands up.
Right.
Which again means it's just inconsistent. And she just says that I want to, there are these strangers here. There's one called McCoy, and I want to marry him.
He must become one of the people, worship the creators, and agree to the insertion of the instrument of obedience.
He will be told what must be done.
And she smiles, stands up, starts to exit, and as she heads out, now Kirk and Spock get hit with that electricity again.
And they stay zapped for quite some time. Yep. The Oracle is not happy at all.
Fools. Do you think we are children? Do you think you can do as you please, commit whatever offense amuses you?
And that is the end of Act 2.
So the whole idea of an interstellar arc has been used so many times throughout science fiction, going back to the 1941 short story called Interstellar Arc for the magazine Universe. It's something that was also used in a Doctor Who episode called The Ark in Space. There was a series called The Star Lost on it. You know, even Battlestar Galactica in some ways is about a ragtag arc going to find Earth.
Wally.
Wow.
That was good.
Yeah, you like that? I think it's a it's a really cool concept, an interstellar arc. I mean, of course, it goes back to the Bible with the ark, Noah's Ark.
What are you going to do to my friends?
They entered the Oracle room.
And the punishment is death?
Yes. I can make no other decision.
I'm surprised that she's not angry at McCoy. He was distracting her, and he knew that they were off doing this thing.
Well, yeah, she doesn't know that he was deliberately distracting her. I mean, I think maybe she doesn't realize that.
Well, it just all goes to she's just 100% in love with McCoy, knows exactly what kind of person he is, rather than this is a stranger she doesn't know anything about.
They acted out of ignorance, Natira.
And McCoy doesn't say, hey, you're on a spaceship and you're all about to die in a year and you're going to kill 5 billion people. That's why they were doing what they were doing.
Right.
Which would be kind of good extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, definitely would be.
And he kind of begs for her to let them go, to go against the Oracle, essentially.
How do you think I'd feel if I stayed here with a chance to be happy for the first time in my life, but knowing my friends had died?
I think that this exchange, their performances are so good, and you've got the empath music cue playing again.
Yep.
George Dunning's score. I just think it's an effective scene in a roller coaster episode.
I totally agree, and I think the line is great. But I also go it's not just that my friends have died; it's you're going to kill my friends.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Am I really going to marry the person who ordered the execution of my two best friends?
For sure. Yep. Absolutely.
We're not really dealing with that.
This I will do for McCoy, for our happiness and future.
We're back to the surface, and McCoy brings them their communicators and their phasers.
You're returning with us.
No, I'm not.
Bones, this isn't a planet, it's a spaceship. On a collision course with Darren 5.
I'm on a kind of a collision course myself, Joe.
This is a really good exchange. I think that the performances of Shatner and D. Kelley are right on point. Nothing dramatic, nothing over the top, just totally restrained and subtle. It's a really good scene.
It is. And he says,
Bones, if we can't correct the course of this ship, we'll have to blast it out of space.
Which means he's saying, I'm going to have to kill you and everybody on this ship. So maybe you shouldn't stay here.
Right.
And again, and that's a really good sort of ticking clock that we've talked about before. Mm-hmm. And they don't really deal with it. It's not
you're right.
Really part of the episode.
It's not instilled into the episode enough to really give it added stakes.
And the choice of Kirk thinking, I have to kill one of my best friends to save 5 billion people. That's not really in the episode.
That's right. You're right.
Lock in on our signal.
Aye, Captain.
Then transport Mr. Spock and myself immediately.
But, Captain, what about Dr. McCoy?
And the way that McCoy slowly backs up. His way of saying, don't even try it. And Kirk goes, he's staying. Closes the communicator. They beam off. The camera zooms in on McCoy's face, where I always thought he was thinking in that moment, did I do the right thing?
I totally agree. we're in the Oracle room, and this is the ritual that's going to make McCoy one of the people of Yonada. And Natira has this thing in one of her hands, asks for his consent. He agrees, and she puts her hands on his two temples, and then...
You are now one with my people.
He takes their hand, they kneel, and we have a wedding ceremony.
We are now of one mind.
One heart.
One life.
And they kiss. By the way, I don't think DeForest Kelley's the best stage kisser.
Yeah, I don't either.
You know what? And the thing is, supporting actors don't get asked to kiss people very often.
I think it's a great moment because this is the only time in Star Trek that we got to see McCoy kiss a woman romantically. You didn't even see him do that in The Man Trap with Nancy. But it's not like his strength. Let's just say that.
And who knows? Maybe the actors hated each other. I mean, we don't know. But the Oracle says to teach him what he must know to be one of the people. And so she gets up, walks over to that monolith we looked at, or obelisk we looked at before, touches a couple of planets, and it opens up, and inside is a big white book.
A big white book that looks a whole lot like the Chicago mobs of the 20s from A Piece of the Action, only it's turned around. So you don't see that. But this is the book of the people, and it's to be read when they reach their new world. Again, they reach their new world because this thing is in motion, but yet somehow there's light and warmth, but they're not supposed to know they're on a spaceship.
Now, is she going to read any of this book right now?
No.
Then why open up? This is what makes no sense. So teach him what it means to be one of the people. Okay, I'll go over, I'll open up a thing with a book in it, but I can't read this book. Like, why?
So she's just showing him the book, but she's not going to read anything from it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's all weird.
Don't you long to know its secrets?
No. It is enough for me to know that we shall understand all when we reach our home.
Okay, well, that's putting a lot of faith in the unknown, but okay.
So we are back on the Enterprise. We're on a parallel course with Yonada, and we are contacting Starfleet.
Captain Kirk, I sympathize with your wish to stay, but I hope you recognize the necessity that you continue your mission at once.
Do you know, does that guy look familiar?
No, who is it?
His name is Byron Morrow. He played the Admiral in Amok Time. That wouldn't let that was like, no, you got to continue on to the function for the Federation. Don't go to Vulcan. And now he's basically kind of being an a-hole, telling Kirk the Yonada matter is now a Starfleet command situation.
And Kirk kind of resists, and he says,
"Perhaps I haven't made myself clear. Let me restate it. You have been relieved of all responsibility for the asteroid ship Yonada. Starfleet Command will take care of the situation."
What does that mean, Starfleet Command will take care of the situation?
Well, it means if they can't figure out how to fix the thing, which I don't see how they're going to do that unless they go there, they're going to blow it out of the stars.
Yeah, and again, we never return to it. This is a great ticking clock. Like, we're dispatching 3 Constitution-class starships to blow it up. You go away now.
Right.
That would be great, but that's not what goes on.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, what if they, instead of having 396 days to
what if you had 2 days?
Situation, what if you had 2, because 3 starships are on their way to destroy the asteroid and
killing McCoy
and everyone else aboard.
Yeah.
But now the Enterprise really has to get this thing back on course or fix the problem before all these people die. Yeah, that would have absolutely... See, that's the Steve Morris rewrite that would have really elevated this episode.
Well, thank you, sir. And then the next moment...
I believe it is time to move on.
And I just wrote bullshit. So McCoy's going to die on this ship. This whole spaceship with thousands of people is going to be destroyed by Starfleet Command, or it's going to crash into Darren 5, and the Enterprise is just going to go, oh, well.
And let's not forget the fact that Kirk is being ordered to drop the situation because it's now a Starfleet matter. Like, do you realize who you're talking to?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of his best friends is going to die and thousands of people. Like, I do not believe we're moving on.
And I do not believe in the no-win scenario.
Of course not. But then we hear from Uhura that McCoy is calling. He's on his communicator and says,
We may be able to get these people back on course.
You've located the controls?
No, but I've seen the book that contains all the knowledge of the creators. And if you...
And then he gets hit by the pain.
If you can get to it, Spock...
Take out the information.
Where is it? Bones, are you all right?
And he passes out from the pain. And Natira enters, and she is looking down, and you could see the light from beneath McCoy's skin on his forehead, where the instrument of obedience is causing the excruciating pain.
Well, and we can hear Kirk still talking over the communicator, and she looks at the communicator, and I think this is a great moment. The guy I just married, the moment after I married him, essentially betrayed me. And they're still in contact, but we never really deal with the betrayal. But that's a real betrayal that McCoy just did,
And he just had this freaking instrument of obedience implanted in his head. And McCoy saw what happens because of when the old guy died. And he still went ahead and started blabbing about the book and getting the ship on course and all that stuff. So, yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies where I can see why this is a roller coaster for you.
Yeah. But that is the end of Act 3. We come right back in the same place in Act 4. She's kneeling with McCoy, takes his hand. Kirk and Spock beam down. They run to him, and she is furious with them.
You are killers of your friend.
And he pulls her away, and Spock does something that removes that little instrument of obedience from his temple.
Yep.
He is not part of our people. You've released him from his vow of obedience.
We have freedom from the cruelty of your oracle.
It's also like you're no longer part of the body. It's also like not being part of the spores.
Definitely the of the body, because that's a mechanical influence.
But essentially they ended the marriage by taking that thing out, I think. And McCoy comes around and they ask him about the book, and she's like, you can't tell them. And he says, it's in the Oracle room.
You will never see the book. It is sacrilege. God! God! God!
And Kirk grabs her, and he has her hand on her mouth, and he brings her behind the screen, which is really weird staging, I think.
Yeah. Like, why is he pulling her aside? Like,
It's
all the
creepy.
way over there.
It seems weird.
10,000 years ago, a sun was dying, and with it, its world. It's the world you see on the plaque in the room of the Oracle.
That is a world of which Yonada is a part.
No. It is the world of your ancestors, your creators. It no longer exists.
You are mad.
No, I'm not. Now listen to me. Hear me out.
And he grabs her and shakes her like pretty hard.
Yeah,
I think he's doing a terrible job of explaining this thing.
But he's trying to sort of give like the Kirk speech, and just in this case, it's just like the truth hurts when he says to her, ultimately, you are living inside a hollow ball.
Yeah. It's just not a good speech. I think we've seen some Kirk speeches that are amazing and brilliantly written, and this one isn't.
Yeah, most of them are amazing. Not this one.
You are living inside a hollow ball. Your ancestors created it to take you on a journey to a promised new planet.
And when she hears that, the pain hits her.
Because she's starting to believe it, and the Oracle can sense that she believes that she's starting to believe it. Listen, I mean, I get this whole scenario, the scene, the reveal here is a little wonky in terms of its execution. But going back to just that line about the truth, about being told lies and wanting to know the truth. Again, it's maybe a little too subtle for its own good, but I definitely picked up on it this time, and sort of tried to imagine what the writers and producers were thinking, back in '68 when this episode was being filmed. Again,
this goes to along with McCoy's loneliness, this idea that I hadn't really thought about till you brought it up, of this relating to how we know what we know about the truth and what we're raised to believe. Those are great themes that don't really come through in this episode.
Yeah.
They're kind of touched on. And I also think I wouldn't believe Kirk if he explained it this way. It's like, come on, I know what I know. This doesn't seem very believable to me.
Why should the truth be kept from us? Why should the creators keep us in darkness?
And I wrote down, good question. Because I don't know why.
Right.
No. You do not speak the truth. I believe only the Oracle. I believe.
And they offer to remove the instrument of obedience, and she runs away.
You think she understood me?
She evidently understood something. There are no guards to detain us.
I don't believe this at all. I really don't believe that she says no way, but doesn't call guards and therefore is thinking this might be true.
Mm-hmm.
She ends up in the Oracle room, and the Oracle is scolding her because she listened to the non-believers.
The truth of Yonada is your truth. There can be no other for you. Repent your disobedience.
I must know the truth of the world.
And she goes down, rolling off the platform in pain.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy that Kirk persuaded her of anything, but that is what is happening in the show. And our guys enter. McCoy goes to her.
Your friends have told me of your world.
They spoke the truth.
Now if you know what, this is the thing. It shouldn't have been Kirk convincing her. It should have been McCoy.
Yeah, you're right. It should have been McCoy.
There's no way that Kirk persuades her the way he did.
But Kirk should have, what Kirk should have done now, or maybe it's a good thing that he didn't because it's become a trope in Star Trek, is that there's no speech from Kirk where the Oracle blows itself up. You know what I mean? Because that would have been sort of the thing to do after Return of the Archons and the change.
I'm glad. I'm glad we didn't do that.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, it's good that we did not do that. That really would have
Yeah. But I keep going now. If McCoy had romantically said, I've seen all these things in the world and I could take you there, and this is what this world is. I could show it to you from the outside. You have to trust, like it was romantic.
Yeah.
I've left everything in my life to be with you. You have to trust me.
Right.
Then I would believe she might be persuaded.
The creators kept us in darkness. There's nothing I can do. I believe with you, husband.
And he gestures to Spock, who gives him the little tube, and he takes out the instrument of obedience from her temple. And then they tell him the book is in the monolith.
It is blasphemy. You are forbidden. The punishment is death.
And we hear thunder. And then the panels start to turn red because we are heating up the room.
It's 110 degrees and rising very, very fast.
Why doesn't the Oracle just zap them?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And by turning up the heat, you're also hurting Natira.
But they open up the thing for the book. They take out the book. The temperature is now 120 degrees. I love the moment where Kirk asks, is there an index? And he's like, yeah. Like, thank God, because we managed to find the right page, which has a diagram that says basically push in the middle of this altar. The platform moves out of the way, a door opens, and I just wrote down, this is all dumb.
Yeah. The way this episode sort of comes to its conclusion, and especially the tag scene, which feels very, very rushed, is a part that does not work very well.
So we get into this computer room. Spock immediately neutralizes the heating elements, and I like the look of the computers. And again, this is just how to cover your bad writing. Oh, it's not that different from the Enterprise.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, well, that's lucky.
Either. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they find out what the issue is, and Spock goes off to check the engines and fix it. This is, by the way, where it would have made sense to have Scotty involved. I like that.
Absolutely, yeah. This is where Scotty would have been like, oh, I know how to fix this thing.
I understand the great purpose of the creators. I shall honor it.
You intend to stay here, on Yonada?
I shall stay willingly.
And this is where I go, this is the theme of that you were talking about of I've been lied to by the powers that be.
Yep, right.
She just ignores it. Like, oh, whatever. I'm just going to stick with it.
Right. It's her people, right.
If she had said, I'm the leader, and with a new passion and knowing what the truth is, this is where we're going to go forward, I would find that more convincing.
I will teach the people the truth.
Yeah, then I'm going to do what the creators wanted me to do.
Now more than ever, I wish to search through the universe to find a cure for myself and all others like me. And I want you to be with me.
You came here with a great mission, to save my people. Shall I abandon them?
I totally get what they're going for. Like I have my destiny and you have your destiny, and therefore we can't be together. It doesn't really work for me in this scene,
They're kind of having the conversation that Kirk would have had with Miramani if Miramani had lived.
Yes.
Because in earlier versions of the story for the Paradise Syndrome, when it was still called the Paleface, there was Kirk had Miramani go with him back to the Enterprise, and then she was so freaked out by the technology on the Enterprise that she wanted to go back down to her planet, and Kirk telling Miramani that our child will be of two worlds. So this is almost like the conversation, although in this case, it does not work because it feels very like this. The last few minutes of this episode feel extremely rushed.
Yeah. I do like when she says,
"Perhaps one day, if it is permitted, you will find Yonada again."
There was a sort of some talk early on that Natira would come across the Enterprise again if they got to a fourth season, but of course they didn't.
Spock comes down. We figured out how to fix the ship. And they start to go when Spock looks down and sees, hey, here's all the knowledge banks of the Fabrini, and they got a lot of medical information.
Yep. Again, also feels extremely contrived and rushed.
It is again, literally Deus Ex Machina. That is God in the machine solving the problem that was unsolvable. It's terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah.
And we cut to sickbay, and McCoy is on the bed, and there's getting some kind of treatment, and he's moaning, and there's some injections.
Excellent, Doctor. The white corpuscle count is back to normal.
And he's fixed.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And Kirk is suggesting that maybe the Enterprise can conveniently be in the area when the Fabrini descendants disembark on their new world. And McCoy smiles.
Yeah, it's kind of such a whatever ending. And I go back to this moment of, have you been lonely? Yes, very lonely. I wish that we were dealing like what do we have in the Kirk endings or the Spock endings? So in the Kirk endings, we see Kirk kind of picking himself up from Miramani, from City on the Edge of Forever, from all of these episodes. And that he's feeling deep pain, but he's going to go forward.
Right.
Or Spock after This Side of Paradise saying, for the one time in my life, I was happy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We don't have that moment here.
Right.
Like there should have been a moment where, you okay, Bones? Oh, sure. Let's just get back to work. And they walk out and he's all alone in sickbay and we see that he's not okay.
That would have been more effective. But again, the last 7 minutes of this episode, there's so much to resolve because they're not going to turn this into a two-parter. But they have to kind of resolve the situation with the Oracle and getting the ship back on course, and also curing McCoy of this incurable disease. And what happens when they cure him? It's just like he's cured, and there's a tease, maybe we can be in the area when the Fabrini disembark. But you're right. There's no sort of payoff. There's how has McCoy changed from this experience?
Yeah.
How does he pick himself up and move forward while still carrying the burden of what he just experienced? We don't get to see that with McCoy like we got to see with Kirk and Spock many times.
And this is why, we've reached the end. This is why I have such weird mixed feelings about this episode. Do anyone else had any interesting feelings about this episode?
Well, I think that Fred Freiberger, the producer throughout the third season, echoed your sentiment for this episode, Steve. He said, I thought it was an okay episode. But Katherine Woodville, who plays Natira, said, I had a lot of fun with them. It was a happy set. It was somewhat difficult to keep it together with a straight face and do my work properly when I had just been falling around and laughing. They were all remarkable.
Oh, nice.
So she had a good experience.
Well, that's good. Is it a bad episode? No, I don't think it's a bad episode. Do I find it watchable? Yeah, it's totally watchable. There are fantastic moments with DeForest Kelley and with Natira. I think they're really good. There are a lot of interesting ideas. And it's just, the more I think about it, the more I just there could have been so much more. That's my feelings.
There could have been so much more. I think that they were maybe a rewrite or two away from getting a better script, one that had an ending that would have had a bigger impact versus one that let's just get this let's just get this done already. That's what it feels like. And unfortunately, it does take away from the episode. Now, I still like this episode. I still like For the World is Hollow. I think that there's more about it that I like than what I don't like. But there is stuff that I don't like. And this deep dive conversation just sort of accentuates the things that do not work, that don't make sense, the plot holes, the questions that you're asking. Well, what about this? What about that? But then there are so many great things about it, like the performances, especially with Katherine Woodville, just the friendship moments between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. All that stuff is ultimately why I overall like it very much.
Actually, Scott, I think I have just one more thing to say.
What's that?
You remember a few minutes ago where you said you felt like this episode could use just one more rewrite? Well, guess what I have?
Ah, the Steve Morris rewrite. I love the Steve Morris rewrite. Always better.
So here are the issues that I was trying to address that we've brought up. One is, and this is the one I couldn't figure out how to fix, is why are they keeping this secret from the people of Yonada? I couldn't fix that. That one's still there. But here are some of the other things we brought up. One is love at first sight. That's a real problem, just not believing how they get into this relationship. Kirk and Spock talk about telling everybody what's going on, but then they don't do it. Why don't Kirk and Spock just try to tell them what's going on?
Right.
There isn't really a great ticking clock going on, and we both felt that the conclusion was really rushed, and I didn't really believe that Natira would believe Kirk when he just tells her what's going on.
Right, okay.
So that's what I'm trying to address. Okay.
All right.
So first off, we're down on in the planet, and those tubes open up, and we're in a fight scene. In this version, one of the Yonadan guards gets injured really badly. And McCoy, who is also injured, sees that he's injured and gets up to go help him because he is a physician. And they threaten him. They're like, stay down. And they put weight. And he's like, no, I have to help this person. And so McCoy, in front of Natira, risks his own life to save one of her people.
Okay. So far,
that is why she is attracted to him, because she sees this quality of bravery and compassion in him right from the beginning.
Okay. Excellent point.
That's the first thing. Second thing, the old man comes in, tells his story, and dies. And then Natira comes in, and Kirk starts to tell her the truth, because that's what he said he was going to do. And as soon as he starts telling her the truth, she starts to feel pain. And we see her showing the same symptoms that the old man showed right before he died. And so McCoy stops him. You can't tell these people the truth, because if they know the truth, it will kill them. And that is why that's why they go, okay, we have to find some other way to stop this ship.
Okay. I like where this is going.
So the next thing that happens is Kirk we go back to the Enterprise, and this is something we said before. It's not a year before Yonada hits this other planet. It was a day. Yonada is getting close to hitting this planet right now. Kirk is talking to Starfleet saying, look, my medical officer's on the planet. We got to go back down and solve this problem. Starfleet Command says, no, we're solving this problem the only way we can. We've dispatched 3 Constitution-class starships. We're going to destroy Yonada. You're relieved. Go away. So Kirk puts the Enterprise between Starfleet and Yonada to protect it. This is the ticking clock.
Okay.
They're going to fire on the Enterprise to destroy the Enterprise to save 5 billion people on whatever that planet is. So the next thing that happens, instead of just McCoy calling and saying, hey, I have the solution, and then passing out, McCoy goes to Natira and says, look, your planet is in jeopardy. I need to save it. And he starts to feel pain. And she goes, hey, stop. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to die if you keep going in this direction. And McCoy says, just like he did to save the guard, it's worth me dying to save other lives. And this is the truth, that I've got to tell you the truth to save these lives. And so McCoy pulls out his communicator as he's trying to tell her this, and then it happens just like it does, which is he passes out, but before he says anything to Kirk. So we hear Kirk going, Bones, are you there? On the communicator, and he's out. And Natira's looking at the communicator, and she decides to talk to Kirk and say, come down here. Is that it's her choice, because it's McCoy being willing to die that convinces her that what they're saying is true.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I like it.
And then it's Natira who is way more active in trying to actually save her people. is that rather than her just being passed out, is she brings them into the Oracle room. She opens up the book. She knows how to do things despite dealing with the pain. So she
You're
becomes
making her more proactive,
more active and more heroic. And then the final thing trying to figure out is what is the end. And I have two, is that right now they just kind of go, okay, we're not going to stay together. And it's very unsatisfying. McCoy says, if this were a more modern show, when McCoy says, I'm going to not rest until I find a cure for this thing, that's what you do for the next season of Star Trek. Is McCoy, part of the ongoing story is him trying to find a cure for his deadly disease.
Well, yeah, really making it serialized. Interesting.
And then the other thing is, in one possible version of this rewrite, Natira dies saving Yonada.
Wow.
And then you have McCoy have a moment like Spock has had and like Kirk has had at the end of the episode. And they say to him in sickbay, you doing okay, Bones? I'm fine. It's no problem. And then they leave and he's all alone in sickbay. And we think about him saying, I've led a very lonely life.
That is a hell of a Steve Morris rewrite.
So there you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone listening, what did you think of the Steve Morris rewrite? Head to our Anchor page and support Enterprise Incidents for as little as $99 a month or as much as $9.99 a month. And maybe Steve will write it.
So that is what we think of For the World is Hollow, and I Have Touched the Sky. Of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. The best places to check us out on social media. Start with Facebook. If you're a Facebook person, you can search for Enterprise Incidents. You could also go to Twitter, where it's Enter Incidents, or on Instagram, where it's Enterprise Incidents. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed to the show, why haven't you already subscribed to the show? It's very easy to do on whatever podcast platform you prefer: Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. Of course, if you're there, please subscribe and leave a review. And you can even listen to the show, not watch it, but listen to it on YouTube, where we love getting your comments. And if you want to reach me, you can do it at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. And if you're interested in movies, my other podcast is The Cinephiles. And my guess is, I challenge you to go take a look at the films that we have done, and my guess is we've done at least one or two of your favorite movies. So check out CINE-FILES. Scott, how would people find you?
People can find me on Twitter and Instagram at MovieMance. And definitely make sure that you go to our Enterprise Incidents Facebook page, where we are constantly posting new things, new podcast episodes, unseen pictures, questions, so we can really engage with you. And we respond to everything. We love engaging with our Enterprisers on our Enterprise Incidents Facebook page. So please follow us on Facebook in particular, but you can also support Enterprise Incidents through Anchor. And Steve, how does that work?
Well, on every show, we put out show notes, and in the very top of the show notes is a link to Anchor. Click on that, and it'll take you to our webpage there, where you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. What else can you get for 99 cents a month? And it really does help us to keep the show going.
And also make sure you share this podcast on all of your social media platforms. We have been so deeply moved and appreciative for all of the amazing support that we've gotten from Enterprisers who've been listening to Enterprise Incidents. But we feel like we still have to get the word out about this podcast so that people can discover and start binging from the very beginning and getting on board with Enterprise Incidents. So if you could share Enterprise Incidents on your Twitter platforms, on your Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, MySpace, whatever you want, just make sure you get the word out about Enterprise Incidents. We will be so, so very grateful. Now, Steve, from the very beginning, when we started doing Enterprise Incidents, I was very excited to eventually get to the voyage that is next on Enterprise Incidents. And boy, was that fast, because that moment has finally come. I cannot believe we are this far into the original series. We are this deep into the third season, but we are at that point where this little squiggly thing flying around in the air is going to feed off of violence to gain strength in the episode that is Day of the Dove, and I'm saying right now is my number one favorite episode of the third season. I cannot wait to dive deep into Day of the Dove with my great pal Steve Morris. So please join us on the next episode of Enterprise Incidents, and until then, keep going boldly.